in the background?
I don't think so yet. All right, I started the recording. That's one thing I like with your when it's your show. You always have better control over the what the heck? Oh, there you are. Okay, over keeping the scatterbrains away, and then okay,
I have better control of what?
like the trajectory of things. Sometimes you'll be like, okay, then so it could be like even your lead. I don't care. You're better at leading interviews and segments than I am. I'm like bing bing bing.
All right, but we're recording now,
Yeah,
and you don't hear any chickens.
I heard that chicken. He was like, it's cool though.
All right, so do you want me to move to somewhere else,
I
or
don't care. The chickens are our
oh, you
guests.
don't?
Yeah, the chickens are the guest show, the guest appearance.
All right, so you ready?
Yep.
All right, and hello everybody, and welcome to New Cokes. And we've got me here, Black Box Ned, also known as Ned Dehan. I should have said that in the opposite order. Ned Dehan, also known as Black Box Ned, because one of them's like my name or something. Well, both of them are my names. So far, off to a bad start. Anyway, we have Vincent McConnell, a man who has a much easier name to organize. And Vincent is the host of the New Cokes channel. I'm actually just a guest. So I'm going to be hanging out here for a while on my chicken farm. And, that's going to be going consistently. And I asked Vincent, do you want me to turn off the chickens? And he said, no, they can be the guests. And I was like, I was going to turn them off. But anyway, so cheers. And today we're going to go with some of Granny's peach tea made by Lex Luthor himself from the movie Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice.
Oh, wow.
And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Vincent.
So Ned and I started talking about doing a show, and a couple things came to mind. The first was that Tom Voigt had recently put an article up, and I'm not sure exactly when this article was dated, where he basically reinforced the old notion and hypothesis that Cheri Jo Bates is a victim of the Zodiac Killer. And Ned and I were talking about, what will we talk about? And I said, well, we should touch on that Cheri Jo Bates thing, and we should also touch on some of this whole MO similarities thing. I think we can guide our way into it as we go. But Ned, I don't know if I've ever heard any official, not so much an official definitive stance, but what do you think about Bates as a Zodiac crime?
When I first learned about the 1966 murder of Cheri Jo Bates, I thought it was just going in the category of absolutely not. Like, what are people talking about? What are people thinking? Why on earth does anybody think that this was a Zodiac victim where a single female is stabbed multiple times outside of a library? And then, how on earth is this similar to the Zodiac? Which I think everybody agrees that it's not. And I think the real reason why the Bates murder gets pulled into the Zodiac world is because we have these sets of letters and communications that happened after the Bates murder. If it weren't for those, of course there'd be people saying that Bates might be a victim. They say that every murder west of the Mississippi in the second half of the 20th century was the Zodiac east of the Mississippi, too. And then I think that over time I've given it some strong consideration. I respect the people who believe that Bates was a Zodiac victim. Michael Cole was just on Planet X Filmworks laying out his theory once again, and he does a very good job of providing the case that Bates was a Zodiac victim. But ultimately, I'm still undecided. Now, I know I'm going on a long-winded spiel because I kind of just talk for like 50 minutes every Monday about this, so I'm used to drawing out my answers. But at first, I was just thinking absolutely not. Then I had to make the ultimate determination. We have letters. We have letters saying Bates had to die. There will be more signed with a Z. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to ignore that evidence. That is physical evidence that shows a similarity between this Z killer from the Bay Area in 1968-69. However, in 2021, when Riverside PD put out their ambiguous/questionable press release, I was ultimately dropping Cheri Jo Bates from about 80% certainty to 40% certainty. And I've received a lot of backlash for this. I do believe that the Bates had to die letters were hoaxes. I do believe that the person who came forward in 2016 who said that he fabricated those letters was telling the truth and saying, he genuinely hoaxed them. This was some news that we had recently talking about the three 1967 letters. And then I'm at about 40% certainty. I recently heard an episode of the Zodcast where Drew Beeson was saying that he's like maybe 100% Cheri Jo Bates was not a Zodiac
Oh.
Killer victim. I'm not there yet. 40% chance, but that means 60% no. What do you think, Vincent?
Yeah, and a lot of that. Whoa, I got a little echo, but I think it's okay. A lot of that comes from the fact that there's communications, and there was this sort of misconception, I think, at that time that killers generally don't write to the media. And we've seen that so many times. Like you've talked about the Axeman of New Orleans and the writing about jazz, and we've seen letters from Jack the Ripper, and we've seen letters from, the Unabomber, and all these guys. And it might have just been that like society and the culture wasn't focused enough on serial killers yet to recognize how frequently they attempt to communicate with investigators and the media for attention. And the Bates thing, it's a stretch, and I think most likely what we're seeing is synchronicity, like Drew talks about, because there's so much of that across so many other unsolved crime sprees that this could just be one of those earliest examples of synchronicity that we have. Um, but
Well, absolutely.
what is it?
No, I just want to reinforce that point that there were countless individuals. I don't even know how many serial killers or murderers sent in letters to the media prior to Cheri Jo Bates. And not only that, we also have the hoaxers and the copycats. Brilliant. You brought up the 1918, 1919 New Orleans Axeman. There's the Axeman's Jazz letter, which I think is a hoax, but that's still a letter that's been connected to a serial killer.
Yeah.
We also have the 3X killer of the 1930s. The Black Dahlia has letters. We get the name Black Dahlia Avenger from letters that were mailed in. There was also an envelope that was mailed in with Elizabeth Short's belongings. Elizabeth Short, of course, the Black Dahlia victim. So killers would send letters to the media. Jack the Ripper did that. And somebody just told me that I need to look into the story of the Red Spider, who was
Okay.
another serial killer that mailed in letters in the 1800s, and I need to check out that story. Completely unfamiliar with it. All I know is the name. But serial killers send in communications. Murderers send in communications. The Black Dahlia was only a single victim. The 3X killer only murdered two people that I can think of. So this really is not as bizarre as it seems.
Yeah, and what do you think of the aspect of Cheri Jo Bates had car troubles at 6:30, but her murder is not until like 3 hours later? Is that true?
I think she had the car trouble at 6:30. I mean,
Supposedly there's
is
this
that true?
gap, this huge
Oh yes,
gap.
there is a gap. I agree, and we have multiple gaps during the Cheri Jo Bates timeline, and I mean, I don't necessarily know if I can comment on her having car trouble at 6:30. I can comment on the possibility about how some people reportedly heard screams in the area, and you must be familiar with this,
Yeah.
and that should have been 1 hour either before or after the murder. The timeline doesn't match up.
Yeah, it's
You
a
know, like
weird timeline.
they swear they heard a woman scream and they gave a reported time that was an hour off, but that was the day then when they switched back to daylight savings time. So that
Could be
just
that.
probably they were thinking about something else. Now, I know that this is also going to bother some people. I think Cheri Jo Bates went to the library. I think she found a table. She went in the back. Maybe she didn't talk to anyone. But this the reason why it bothers people is I think maybe she left, and I don't have enough evidence to say that she did anything. Let's say, for example, she did go out of the library and she had the car trouble, right? What if she met up with Bob Barnett and they went out for a while? I
Yeah.
don't know that. I'm open to the possibility. And people are always like, oh, you're always just kind of wavering and on the fence. And I'm like, you want to know why? It's an unsolved case.
Yeah,
If I knew
definitely.
everything, I would just solve the case. I think it's a totally reasonable possibility that she left the library earlier than expected. She went out with somebody. Maybe it was Bob Barnett. Maybe it was somebody else. Maybe she, actually left 1 hour earlier or later from Bob Barnett, and those screams were actually accurate according to a different timeline. I think that I'm a little bit undecided on the timelines. What do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. You mentioned the daylight savings thing. That's definitely relevant because people forget that in those days your clocks didn't set themselves. You had to go and manually, you know, change your clock for daylight savings, and if it's a 1 hour difference, then that's probably the most likely explanation for that witness report being off by an hour. And I think that's a great point that you brought up. But if there is this great period of time for hours where Bates is walking around with her killer, that's just one more factor that leans against the Zodiac. Because the Zodiac, aside from Berryessa, was for the most part an in and out kind of guy. He would get to the crime scene, execute his crime, and then get the hell out of there as fast as he could. And there was generally very little interaction with victims. I mean, with Stein, we have him riding in the cab. I'm not sure how long that cab ride is. Maybe it's like 15 minutes or whatever. But it's generally, Zodiac isn't walking around with people for hours. So if there is this gap, that's another thing that leans against that. Yeah.
No, you go ahead. Please continue.
I was just so surprised to see Tom Voigt's level of certainty. I mean, he has her listed as an official victim, and he was really reinforcing the Sherwood Moral thing.
And the Cecilia Shepard Riverside connection there too, right?
Yeah, as if Hartnell was combating car troubles that were instigated by a mysterious killer following them from the campus all the way to. So it was very strange.
I mean, part of me wants to accept that because it makes sense about how, all right, this killer is from Southern California. He spent time at Riverside. He knew Cheri Jo Bates. He knew Cecilia Shepard. They were specific targets. That's why they're attacked by night. That's why there's the hooded costume. He didn't want to be recognized by Cecilia. I said that so many times on Black Box Online Radio. When I did the Zodiac Killer channel interviews, I even said that stuff there. I thought Cecilia was the specific target for every reason that I just gave you. She's attacked by night. The killer is wearing the mask because he didn't want to be recognized by her. So he followed her, kind of stalked her for who knows how many days, months, weeks, because we have the gap from Blue Rock Springs to Berryessa. But I don't think there's any evidence to support that. And as we all know, it is just Riverside PD put out their response in 1982 in regards to the Cheri Jo Bates murder. And while they don't completely dismiss it, they have definitely distanced themselves from the possibility. I was about to say a 1982 press release, but I don't want to misstate the nature of the document. And overall, though, I mean, what do you think the likelihood is that the Zodiac actually murdered Cheri Jo Bates?
Gotta be low, because I've mentioned this before that with Bates, we have what you can basically refer to as a finishing maneuver. So she's stabbed in the torso a couple times with this knife, and then it appears that after that you have the killer slits Cheri Jo Bates' throat. And such a maneuver would ensure the death of the victim with basically 100% certainty. And we actually never see that with Zodiac. We have at Lake Herman Road, of course, the brainstem shot to David Faraday, and that could have been deliberate, which is pretty close. Michael Mageau, he left him completely alive, which is strange. And then at Berryessa, he has both the victims either tied up or hogtied. There's been some dispute about how that went down. And he doesn't stab their brainstems. And with Paul Stein, he shoots him in the side of the head, but he only executes the one gunshot, and he doesn't do anything that's going to be, okay, there's a 0% medical possibility of this individual surviving, which is something you would have with the carotid and jugular being severed. That person is dead. There is no coming back from that, except for we've talked about the hockey incident that you know about. But of course, this guy was on live TV, and he had medics, and he had everything standing by for him. Cheri Jo Bates was in an alleyway between two storage houses in a mostly empty section of a college campus, and so there basically is no chance for that victim to survive that crime. And I think the killer knew that when he delivered that particular wound. So it's a very brutal, very bloody, very aggressive type of crime to do that. There was obviously some kind of struggle at the scene because you have this watch getting dropped, you have screams that were supposedly heard, and if all we really have for the most part is this letter writing and the possibility of a Riverside connection, it's very, very weak evidence to stand on. I don't want you to forget where you were going before, because I could go on tangents and then I forget where I was. So.
Okay, and for the audience, just to be clear, when he said the hockey incident, Vincent and I were talking recently about the hockey player Clint Malarchuk, who was playing for the Buffalo Sabres, right? And he got cut across the neck, and then it's one of the bloodiest and most horrific sports injuries ever. But he survived because, as Vincent said, a medic was on site. It happened so fast you can barely see it.
That's terrible.
But I have a question though for you,
Yeah.
Vincent, in regards to the Bates murder, and I have a question involving Zodiac activity. What would you like, the Zodiac question or the Bates question?
Zodiac question.
Well, how much stock do you put in the Zodiac's admission that he had Riverside activity? Because it's not only the Bates letters. You did clarify in your statement just now that it's not just these letters that were written after the murder of Cheri Jo Bates that are a little bit like Zodiac. The Zodiac said clearly, I give you credit for stumbling upon my Riverside activity, but you're only getting the easy ones. How much weight do you put in that? Is he telling the truth? Is he lying? Is he talking about Cheri Jo? I mean, like, is he talking about something else? What do you think?
He doesn't give us holdback evidence. He doesn't give us anything classified, and that was kind of the Zodiac's rundown. Like, right away in the 3-part 408 letter, it's literally like in the first line of text is, to prove this, I shall state some facts that only I and the police know. At Stein, he's mailing in forensic evidence from the crime scene, which is very, very powerful proof that you're the offender, and much more even than holdback, because not only does that show us that the killer isn't just somebody with insider law enforcement knowledge, it shows us the killer was someone with Paul Stein that night, and had access to slice off his bloody shirt. So the Zodiac loves to give us stuff that really proves it was him. And just to say, I give them credit for stumbling upon my Riverside activity, that's not nearly as compelling as, maybe give us a piece of the Timex watch from the crime scene, or give us like a hairpin or something that Bates or what about the distributor cap from the engine of the vehicle? Like, he could have sent us a piece of real evidence, and he didn't do that. And I think the Zodiac loved to waste and misdirect those law enforcement resources. With the bus bomb, you have this 32 character code, and not only do you have that, you have a whole geographic puzzle to work with. And he's trying to get investigators running on this wild goose chase from here to there, looking for this bomb and going to the roadsides and following the school buses. And it just diverts everybody's attention away from, let's look for fingerprints on the shell casings, or let's look for, later in the later years, of course, now we have DNA, but let's look at forensic evidence from the crime scenes. And instead, he wants everybody to just be scrambling all over the place looking for things that don't exist. And I think Riverside's a great way to do that, because it's such a far away geographical area that if he can get guys from San Francisco to be flying back and forth to Riverside and talking to them and looking at the wrong crime scene, it's just a great way to divert more and more resources. And he probably started to do that as he felt that heat closing in. When is the date on that Riverside letter? It's like 70 or 71 or something?
Yes, but I will offer one challenge to that, and this is that the Zodiac wrote that letter after the Stein murder and after his declaration that he was no longer going to announce his crimes in the same ways. With Kathleen Johns, he says, I gave a ride to a woman and her baby, an interesting ride to a woman and her baby for a couple of hours, right, mostly. Yeah. And then with the Bates murder, he just calls it Riverside activity, if he is indeed referring to Cheri Jo. So, do you think that has any impact on the way the Zodiac would share that? He openly said he is not going to announce his crimes with all of the details that he provided in the debut letter, and he's not going to mail in something like the piece of the shirt like he did with the Stein murder, because he openly says, I don't want people to slow down my collecting of slaves, and he just openly said that he was going to do different things. Do you think there's any truth to that?
That's kind of mostly a decision of how much do you trust the Zodiac, because
0.
Yeah. It's like that's such a great fear tactic and such a great way to spread that terror in society is that not only now is he going to continue killing, but you're not even going to know when it's him, and he could hit anywhere, anytime, any kind of person with any type of murder. And most likely that's Zodiac just trying to, do a psyop on us. But it does bring us a little bit into the whole modus operandi, because I've noticed in true crime that people love to say, oh, this has MO similarity. This has, MO factor similarity. And I didn't recognize how complicated the concept of MO was until I went to Irvine and saw those original Night Stalker crime scenes. That MO is such a personalized thing. Like, a criminal develops his ways through a lot of trial and error, through a lot of very unique and individualized ways of thinking. And that just because someone is tied up here and someone is tied, well, what else is he supposed to do? Use handcuffs? Or, like, is that really an MO similarity? Or is it just that people tie people up when they kill other, it's such a complicated thing. I don't see any non-canonical activity that I would say is just so obviously the Zodiac Killer. But people like to look for those little snippets of similarity and then use them to connect crimes. And it's possible that Tom Voigt has access to something we don't know about. If he does, and if Tom Voigt sees this, I really implore you, like, if you have something beyond Sherwood Moral or the Cecilia Shepard thing that really ties this to Zodiac, we'd like to see it. Because if we can confirm that Bates is a Zodiac victim from 3 years or 2.5 years, whatever, before canonical Zodiac activity, then this allows us to pursue clues in Riverside that might lead to his identity. But we have to have that confirmation, because if we don't have that confirmation, we can't apply anything that we find at Riverside to making any definitive assessments of whether or not, or definitive assessments on how Zodiac acts, because we don't know it's him. So, are there any clues there? Don't know, because we don't have the proof that it's him.
All right, Vincent, next up. Do you want the Bates question or the Zodiac question?
We'll alternate. I guess we'll do Bates, because I don't know as much about Bates, but
I don't know it perfectly either, but neither does anybody else, so that's why we have some leeway. How long do you think Cheri Jo actually spent in the library? And why don't I just add my condition to this? Some people think that she would have spent a couple hours in the library, right? Maybe sitting at the table in the back corner. As of now, maybe that's one of the biggest understandings that we have. But I think there are certain reasons why people look at the abduction theory and they look at her leaving. When I was 18, 19, 20, any age ever, I didn't actually study that much in the library. And our good friend Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time. Oh, yeah, you said you studied for 3 hours, but it was actually a lot less, right? And how long do you think she actually spent in the library? Because it'd be totally reasonable for somebody to say that. Kind of walk in, get their books, and then do something else. Do you think that she was actually in the library for multiple hours or something else going on here?
It could go either way, and people they look at everything with this bird's eye view where, like, we have the benefit of hindsight. We now know that Cheri Jo Bates is a murder victim. At the time she was sitting in that library, there was no significance to that night for everybody else. Like, if somebody saw her in the library, she's not going to stand out until later, because now she's a murder victim. So before that time, like, people aren't looking as closely as people think they were, because now we're operating with the knowledge that she was then killed that night. But at that time, she was nothing but another student sitting in the library. And if she wanted to keep a low profile and she was hanging out at a back table and didn't really say hi to anyone, or just kind of wasn't in the mood for that night, it's very possible that she could have sat there for a couple hours and never been recognized.
Of course. And I've always just thought that I didn't buy the explanation about, she was an attractive, friendly, outgoing girl. Of course, she would have talked to somebody. I mean,
That's
I don't know that. If
yeah.
somebody actually went there to, look at books or something, maybe she actually was trying to do her studying. I mean, I think that that's really, really making too many assumptions
Yeah.
about someone's behavior and trying to micromanage the whole thing. Because just because you expect her to behave that way, it doesn't mean she did that on October 30th of 1966.
Yeah, she could have been in a terrible mood, or who knows what anything. Like
He could have been what?
she could have been just in an antisocial mood. She just didn't want to see anybody. Didn't want. Who knows what happened? And people are like craving that answer. Like, how could no one have seen this? Like, there must have been some witness report somewhere that someone interacted with her. It's like we don't know that. And like Ned says, she could have not been there for as long as we think. So
I mean, I believe she went in the library. Her books were on the front seat of the car, right? I believe she checked out the books, or she had the books in her possession, and that I don't know exactly how long that took because did she have some secret meetup plan with Bob Barnett? You would think that we would probably have knowledge of that if like they had an agreement and he was not the killer because like especially when they tried to arrest him in the 1990s. What was that, Vincent? Was it 98 or 99 when they actually tried to do the arrest, but of course
I
his
don't know.
DNA didn't match? So then they're just like, maybe he's not the guy.
And
But
that's so weird with Bates is we have samples of the killer's biological material, don't we? From
if
the
you ask
fingernails.
Bruiser, he'll say no.
Okay. Well, I put a lot of stock in things Drewser says. He's one of those objective scientific guys like you, where
Yes.
so far he hasn't said anything where I'm like, okay. And so if he says that, and it also makes you because we don't have an arrest, and DNA science is so far along now where if they have a full profile on you, there's nothing like they did Bryan Kohberger's investigative genetic genealogy in 6 days. So
Oh yes, yes,
what's
absolutely.
holding that identification back if we really have that
What's
DNA
quite
profile?
possible is just that Bob Barnett was not the killer.
No.
Like I go through a lot of the typical things that people do with Cheri Jo Bates. At first, you're like, oh, well, it has to be Ross Sullivan because he was being weird, but that's not a crime. Secondarily, it has to be Bob Barnett, right? Ex-boyfriend, and he's Cheri Jo's engaged to Dennis Highland, who's a student at San Francisco State University. Bob Barnett is jealous. He blindsides her outside of the library. Hey, hey, I just want to talk. No, no, like, come over here. No, I just want to talk, Cheri Jo, and then pulls a knife and it's revenge killing, impulsive. He just snapped. And then he cleans the blood off him and goes to work at midnight or whenever his shift started at that one job. And I was like, all right, I'll accept that. But, Ken Maines said it the best. The hair that was found on Cheri Jo's hand, like in the webbing between the index finger and the thumb, was not his. The hair that's in the blood was not Bob Barnett's. And he's like, you would not get a conviction. Not only that, you would not even get a warrant for Bob Barnett's arrest if there's a hair that's most likely from the killer and it's not his.
Yeah, that's pretty major. If you have this, do we know if it's a male hair or whatever that's there?
I think some people know.
Yeah.
And they talked about this on the Citizen Detective podcast when they were actually like postulating that it might have been a female hair and it might have actually belonged to Cheri Jo herself. But I think that they probably would be able to tell. They should be able to tell male DNA versus female DNA, right?
Yeah, I think they could do that. Um, and but it does open questions. It's like, where are the other murders by this offender? So if it's
I can answer that.
okay, go run it.
Because wasn't I just about to tell you, like, I asked you, do you want the Bates question or the Zodiac question?
Yeah.
That was my Zodiac question for you. So let's go.
Okay.
And Michael Cole, was recently on Planet X Filmworks, and I've read his book, Zodiac Revisited Trilogy. I talk about them all the time. And he just outlined his theory, saying that, talking about non-canonicals, you have Gaviota, you have San Diego, Ocean Beach, and then you have Riverside. And all of these crimes have a certain amount of proximity to the greater Los Angeles area. Maybe Riverside counts as the greater Los Angeles area, but not Gaviota and not San Diego. So what Michael Cole is thinking is that it seems like there's a killer who's based in the greater Los Angeles area who is putting a certain amount of distance between himself, his home, and the kill sites. And then, he started out with Domingos Edwards, which does have the hallmarks of Lake Berryessa. Then Ocean Beach, the Swindle murders. Maybe he steals the watch, and then he leaves the watch behind at Riverside. Maybe Cheri Jo broke it off, but then what happened is he murders Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards by gun, 22 caliber firearm. He murders Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle the next year by gun, 22 caliber firearm. And then he realizes, you know what? People are going to figure this out. I have to do something different. The authorities are already on to me. And this was true. Like, you can read this in the newspapers when it says that they're speculating that there's a link between the Swindle murders and the Santa Barbara murders. Domingos Edwards. It's
Yeah.
not really in Santa Barbara. And he just thinks I have to change it up, so I'm going to do something different. And he commits a stabbing instead of a murder, and then starts writing in the communications. What do you think about all that?
That hypothesis does kind of rely on a link between Swindle, Domingos Edwards, and Bates as being the same offender.
That's right.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. It's just so hard to say because it's hard to connect crimes. A lot of times it takes DNA to do that. Like we saw with Original Night Stalker, how investigators were pursuing that traditional route of the killer must know these people. They tried to railroad Joe Alsip. They tried to railroad Lyman Smith's daughter into these murders. And then eventually the DNA came out, and it was the DNA that went, oh, no, this is all the same guy. And we just so far don't have that with those murders. And, yeah, I don't know if those are... It's hard for me to say if those are linked. And, of course, we don't have the holdback, so...
I think I enter into the category that a lot of people do, and that is that even if I don't agree with all of Michael Cole's observations, I do respect his sincerity and his genuine approach, and he shares what he genuinely thinks, and he provides reasons, and you can tell that he's put a lot of thought into his hypothesis and the Zodiac Revisited trilogy. But I would also admit that there's insufficient evidence for that, and I think Vincent, I only believe that the 5 Northern California murders, the canonicals, were committed by the Zodiac. And the simple reason is insufficient evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, and especially with a crime like Bates, if we had some type of DNA link, it'd be game over. But obviously, that type of evidence is not present. And I think it was you, Vincent McConnell, who said that the Zodiac is trolling. How do you know if it's a fake Zodiac letter or not? He's not acting like a troll.
Yeah.
When the Zodiac said Riverside activity, easily, that could be trolling. It's like false leads, red herrings, doing things so he would not get caught. And also, just that's where the power lies. This guy wanted power.
Yeah.
Why is the Zodiac shooting Mike Michaud and just walking away without making sure that he's dead? He was more focused on being in control rather than killing. Same with Lake Berryessa. He could have slit their throats and made it game over. He was more focused on being in control rather than killing. So says me.
People talked about, like in the Idaho student murders, how one of the witnesses got this great look at Bryan Kohberger, and that Bryan Kohberger had seen that witness, knew that they were in the house, and kept walking. And they were saying, "Well, why didn't Kohberger kill her?" And I hypothesized that it's a power and control thing, because now Dylan Mortensen has to live the rest of her life knowing that Bryan Kohberger had her life in his hands that night, and he chose not to kill her. It's like the ultimate power trip to just leave someone alive on purpose. And so if it is a control aspect like you're talking about, then it definitely makes sense, because ultimately, at the end of the day, Brian Hartnell's life was in the hands of the Zodiac that day. Zodiac could have stabbed him in the brainstem, and he 100% would have died. And so maybe he gets off just as easily on knowing that he had that sort of power over human life and didn't take it on purpose. And I'm like you, insufficient evidence on non-canonicals, and I'm totally open and ready for, if they find a conclusive link, say they get the DNA profile from the hair and it matches a touch DNA profile from a shell casing at Lake Herman Road, then sure, I'm all for it. It's Zodiac. But until we have that, we don't have that solution. So
All right, now, Vincent,
Yeah.
we've entered into a new world. What do you want now? Bates
Anything?
question, Zodiac question, or Kohberger question?
Oh, jeez. Let's just spice it up for them and go Kohberger.
Real fast though, because Bryan Kohberger did commit the crime by knife.
Yeah.
What do you think about the possibility that he left Dylan Mortensen alive in that scenario because he was simply just coming down from his adrenaline spike? He had just killed four people by knife, stabbing them dozens of times, and then his energy was just depleting. So he just said something to her to walk away. That would still hold on to everything that you said.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, he terrified her and emotionally scarred her for life, but
Yeah.
I'm here to help. Just says something stupid and then walks out the door. What do you think about that?
It could, yeah, it could be that. We know those are very, very brutal crimes. It was kind of a mix between stabbing and bludgeoning, where the now we know,
Yes,
we've heard much more detail now post conviction that Kohberger basically stabbed Maddie and Kaylee in the face so many times that at least one of them was like unrecognizable from K-bar wounds that went from the nose to the eye. So it's just very, very physically demanding, aggressive, energetic murder that I could totally see him basically coming down from adrenaline or being fatigued. But it does make you wonder of like, wouldn't he be concerned about having witness descriptions from? I mean, he was such a
yes,
weird criminal. He did so many things that don't make any sense, like bringing the phone and doing. So I don't know.
absolutely. And I mean, what the way I think that works is, let's say there are maybe 100 bases that a criminal has to cover so they don't get caught, and Kohberger perhaps only accounted for about 75 of them, meaning that there were just 25 massive gaping holes in his strategy.
Yeah.
Whereas the Zodiac Killer did something where I think he was targeting people that he did not know.
Me too.
I don't think he spent a lot of time with the victims, with the exception of Lake Berryessa, which might have been, I don't know, 15 minutes. That's one estimation that I've heard that I think is a little bit reasonable. That
Mm.
might even be excessive,
It's probably long.
depending
Yeah.
on what they're saying. But he really doesn't linger at the crime scenes. He doesn't leave a lot of things behind. And the Zodiac didn't have to worry about DNA the way that Kohberger did. But I would like to ask you, though, what do you think about the motive in the Kohberger case? Why do you think he did it?
Appears to just be this sexually motivated.
Sex. Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
They said it. We got it out. Okay, great, great, great. Now we've covered that one. No, I'm joking. Please continue. Continue.
Yeah. That he's such a weird dude. Who knows what in the world's going on inside that guy's mind? And it's like this with so many. The kind. I know that Ryan Burns talks about how Cooper woke up that morning and decided to like put his clothes on, get his gear, and literally board an airplane and do this attack. Like something
Of
about this
course.
person's psychology is just so screwed up that they actually went through with it, because you have a lot of Kohbergers in the world who are sexually attracted to the concept of murder but never actually act on it. And so for someone to act on it, that person has got to be really got some messed up wheels. And
Yes. Now, as far as these situations about people not acting on things, I think Nicole Legg said it best when I interviewed her about DB Cooper when she's like, there must have been something psychologically off about DB Cooper. She asked me
for sure.
personally, would I skyjack an airplane? I'm like, no. Like, it's like most of us would not do that. Like, and also, I mean, Dr. Michael Stone put it this way, that when a son is talking to his father and the father says, I'm cutting off your allowance, it's actually normal. Like if the son starts visualizing, oh, I could stab my father in the heart right
Yeah.
now. If it comes in your mind for a second, he's like, that's not really something to be afraid of. And because then it just fades away
Yeah.
and he'll never think about it again for the rest of his life. With Kohberger, I definitely think that he was attracted to the two victims that he targeted first. I
Yeah.
think he was aware that it was their bedroom. And, he used a lot of VPNs to hide his activities. We don't know how much he was actually looking at their whereabouts. But yeah, I think he chose that house because he was physically attracted to either Maddie or Kaylee or both. And when I did my episode, I said Maddie was the primary target, Kaylee was the secondary target. And I think that's really all we have, and that Xana and Ethan were just caught in the crossfire or even though he committed the crimes by knife, of course. They crossed his path more or less, and then everything that we've said about Dylan Mortensen is pretty much the way it played out. Not much of a mystery, but this really does seem like someone who was an incel, someone with psychopathic tendencies, someone who was perhaps just waiting for the opportune time, maybe because of his criminology education, because he thought that he had learned enough about how to commit the perfect murder that he was going to do it. You know, Leopold and Loeb couldn't pull it off. Neither could Kohberger, and Kohberger was a lot dumber. Both Leopold and Loeb were geniuses.
Especially in their minds.
Yes, I actually just read the other day was that Richard Loeb had an IQ of 160,
Jeez.
and his boyfriend Nathan Leopold Jr. had an IQ of 210. Although I think they fudged the scores back then. I don't think that those would be holding up today. I mean, George Hodel had an IQ of 186, and he was a dumbass.
Yeah,
useless human.
That's a crazy IQ, man. 210. You'd think they would have done the murders with laser vision if they were,
But you imagine your boyfriend, has an IQ of 210. Like, you have an IQ of 160. You're smarter than most of the population. Or let's be clear, you have a higher IQ than most of the population. You could probably beat a lot of people in mental chess. And then your boyfriend is just kind of like 50 points higher than you, and just like, how do I fit into this world? You know what? I'm just going to go along with his plan to murder somebody.
Yeah.
Don't drop the glasses, kids.
Yeah, Ned brings up a really good point about the intrusive thoughts of violence and the difference between acting on those intrusive thoughts and just having them. And for a really long time, I've kind of speculated, hypothesized, or otherwise mentioned that I think the ability to kill is hardwired into the human genome, because way back in evolution, if you go back, to caveman times, if human beings weren't capable of killing each other, humanity would never have lasted, because they had to be able to fight wars, they had to be able to protect their resources. So there's these sort of leftover reptilian genes, and I think it especially applies to the military-aged male, where something happens and the intrusive thought, the reaction is, I'm gonna fucking kill that person. Whereas someone who thinks that, and then someone who actually develops and executes and implements a plan to do that, is on just a whole other level of intensity.
I agree. I agree. And one professor once said that it's actually normal for people to contemplate murder once in their life, not even just have like that, thought that comes to mind for a second. And it's actually normal to contemplate it once in your life. But I have to confess, that professor was Thomas Henry Horan, so who knows where he got it from. Stone's Unturned podcast, before it was behind the paywall, people. Yeah, who knows what's going on over there now? And I do mean that. Who knows what's going on?
Yeah, something.
I mean, I saw his point, but I can't really comment too much on that exact angle, because that's a way more extreme thing. But I think what it means to show is that I don't even remember where I heard this one, but somebody said, if somebody is dealing with a bully, or someone like a coworker is being mean to them at work, or they're dealing with someone harassing them, or a stalker, and it's not abnormal to visualize yourself hurting them. It doesn't mean that you're crazy. It doesn't mean that you're excessively dangerous. That actually is a normal response. And I'm sure people don't want to talk about it. But
yeah, big time.
I think that's totally on point. With the Zodiac, though, Michael Cole might have been right about something when he wrote in one of his books that the Zodiac probably fantasized about this for so long. He probably played out the scenario in his head over and over again.
Yeah.
And then he just went with it, and it was actually a lot more difficult than he thought. Whether you think Lake Herman Road was first or Gaviota was first.
And you bring that up, that it's so much more difficult, because Lake Herman Road is such a chaotic crime scene. It just doesn't
ridiculously chaotic.
Yeah, it doesn't reek of an experienced offender at all to me. I mean, Betty Lou's 21 feet away by the time that she's killed, or she collapses 15 or 21 feet away. He basically got lucky that Faraday was this. I mean, who knows how how deliberate the exact shot placement was there. But the fact that Betty Lou was even running away when she was shot, and then we see at Blue Rock Springs that Zodiac doesn't let them leave the car, that's that learning adaptation. That's that, like,
That's right.
I've never
That's right.
done this before, but now based on how that went down, let's adjust. And it's such a simplistic aspect of the crime. Don't lose control of the crime scene.
And also, I'm going to carry a big flashlight at Blue Rock Springs because that puny little pencil flashlight on the gun barrel did nothing.
Yeah, you think he really did that?
I'm leaning toward it. Do I think he actually had the pencil flashlight on his gun barrel?
Yeah.
I can definitely say that that method works. And, I mean, I've seen it work. And I really, though, like, I don't know how much it would have helped with visibility, and that's perhaps why he brought the bigger flashlight to Blue Rock Springs. I mean, I guess I'm saying it this way because I don't completely know, but I lean toward that way.
Yeah.
But I really want to ask you, Vincent, what do you think about my hypothesis at Lake Herman Road? Let me know where I'm wrong. Let me know if I've misstated something. But December 20th, 1968, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen are in the car, right?
Yeah.
The Zodiac comes over. He doesn't say a word. He pulls out a gun, and then he fires the warning shot. Then he says something like, "Get out of the car." And then he starts walking to David Faraday's side of the car. And the warning shot is why we get the odd shell casing that's kind of in a weird place.
Yeah.
And then he walks around, and Betty Lou is the one who says, "David, let's run." And they both exit the passenger side door. The Zodiac easily walks around to the passenger side, intercepts them, holds them up at gunpoint, says, "Don't move." And then they're just kind of like standing there. He shoots David, but he didn't expect that Betty Lou was going to run. She has flight instincts.
Yeah.
If he learned instantly, he would have known that she would do that because he fired the warning shot and walked around and she tried to run away. Absolutely useless defense. But that's what her instincts did. So she is, and she starts running away. Then the Zodiac has to gun her down. I don't know how quickly he could get his shoot at the dark spot at the center of the light. I don't know how quickly he could pull that off and actually maintain that type of focus and mindset. But maybe he could, and that's what I think happened. I don't really think there was a big conversation. I just think that he drove in, fired the gunshots, drove away. What do you think?
Yeah, whatever it was happened fast because we have that couple-minute window from the first people driving by and seeing the two vehicles, and then the next person, what's her name, Betty Yor or something Yor, that then
Stella Borges?
Is she who saw the bodies on the ground?
I think so.
Okay. So it's only like this
rusty.
couple-minute window. So we know the confrontation happened quickly. It is weird that they both got out the passenger side door. So she climbed over the center console to get out of the vehicle. Isn't that weird?
Betty Lou would have climbed over the center console?
Yeah, because she's in the driver's seat. So what is that? Does the Rambler have a center console? Let's see.
Betty Lou was in the driver's seat, and David was in the passenger seat at Lake Herman Road?
No, that's not what I meant.
Other way around. Springs, Blue Rock Springs, they were like that.
So David Faraday climbed over it.
I would have thought it was weird, but when I watched the movie Lover's Lane, even though that's a fictional film about a Lover's Lane serial killer, not Zodiac related, but that even happens in that film. After I made my hypothesis, the girl's like, "We have to run," and then they both exit the passenger side door. People would hop over consoles, and some of the older cars, they actually had like a third seat in the middle. You must have seen that in the old movies, right? Like
it's like a bench
where you would have three people sitting in the front.
Yeah, I could be just thinking too modernized here of the vehicle. It's
Well, I mean,
but it's weird because
go ahead.
You'd think it would be a better way to escape to each go out of a different door and then run like separate ways. But I think in the heat of the moment, it would be hard to make that decision.
Or to
side of a Rambler.
Or for David to just turn the car on and floor it, and that probably would have been their safest exit strategy. I totally get you. I mean, if they split up, Scooby-Doo style gang, let's split up. Well, one of them's ending up dead. I mean, I think the killer probably would have gotten to them. I don't think the Zodiac would have let them live if they had split up.
Yeah,
There's only so many places they could go at Lake Herman Road.
And especially for people who want to tie those earlier shootings like Gaviota and the Swindles to this, like those people have to then account for why in the world is Lake Herman Road such an out of control crime scene? Because if this is someone who's done this before, he should know better. He should know to just walk up to the vehicle and just dump through the windows, not usher them out of the car and do all this
Right.
complicated stuff.
There is no way they would have known that that was a serial killer. He could have even tapped on this. Hey, excuse me, I just want to know, is this... And
Yeah,
then
very effective because he could hit headshots all the same, probably easier if they're inside the
up
cab.
close and personal, but,
Yeah.
all right, then. I do have a question for you. This just came to mind.
Okay.
But it's very relevant to what we've been talking about. I've already mentioned Ross Sullivan as a suspect. He is somebody who had schizophrenia. So did Richard Gaikowski, and so did Ted Kaczynski, other Zodiac Killer suspects. Do you think that the Zodiac's actions indicate that he was a schizophrenic or he had a similar type of mental disorder where he did things because they were unplanned, uncalculated, illogical sometimes? Because it was a result of his psychotic thinking? Or do you think that he was cool, calm, and collected, always in control? Not cool. There's nothing cool about the Zodiac. I should have said cold, methodical, and calculating. What do you think? Schizophrenic or methodical?
A schizophrenic generally doesn't have a lot of control over those episodes. Like I've known a schizophrenic, and I couldn't like I learned so much about schizophrenia through that experience that it is such a dark and unbelievably overpowering illness. Like the person that I knew that had schizophrenia was in jail like every month. There was always crazy stuff going down. They never had any. And when these episodes would start, there was no reining that back. There is no logic. I mean, and Zodiac appears to have been mostly in control. I think more likely he's some kind of psychopathic attention seeker, but not so much on a break from reality because he's learning and he's doing these patterns of adaptation from crime to crime that really indicate someone who's in control of their thought processes. Now, it doesn't mean that what they're doing is moral or good, and they could be absolutely violent, horrible human beings and still have the ability to think with logic and think with reasoning. And with Zodiac, like, people want to just tie killing to mental illness so readily that, like, because we can't imagine, like, what in the world is going through someone's mind to really go and execute a crime like that. But as far as, like, that chaotic schizophrenic thing, I haven't seen it. So I think we would have caught him if he was like that. But what is interesting that you brought up about doing irrational things, I've mentioned with Paul Stein and the bloody shirt, that when he shot Paul Stein, the fastest way to get a piece of bloody shirt is to take the back of his collar like this, and in one slice, you could chop off a nice handful of fabric from the back of that shirt collar. But that's not what Zodiac appears to have done. Zodiac appears to have executed 3 clean cuts in the shirt, so going on the shirt tails going down, across, and down. And this puts him at the crime scene for way longer, relatively speaking, than it would to just in one fell swoop take a piece of that shirt collar. So he does do things that don't make sense sometimes. And it's very possible, though, eventually, if we identify him or we figure out what really happened, that certain things will click into place. And we'll go, okay, that's why he did it that way. And we just don't know yet. But no, I think he's too much in control of his own... it's the process of logic. Because when I knew that schizophrenic, there was never a process of logic. You couldn't get through to that person with reasoning, you know. It was just insane. And with Zodiac, we see this, okay, that happened, so therefore I'm going to adapt this way. And it's very much, I hate to say it, but it's like logical thought progression. And
oh yes, and a doctor once advised me on that by saying that in psychosis there is no logic.
Yeah.
Because like the person just really has neurotransmitters firing in their brain at and that's just what it is, like kind of like firing off like neurochemical explosions, and that's not logical.
Yeah.
Now, if we're going to though talk about the Stein murder, I think you've heard me say this before about why I think the Zodiac cut off the back of his shirt in the past. I was perhaps one of the louder voices about the Zodiac Jack the Ripper connection. I think I've convinced people about some of the basic elements. I'm absolutely not as staunch and defensive of it as I was in the past. But I thought the Zodiac was trying to emulate from Jack the Ripper and recreating the murder of Catherine Eddowes because the Zodiac was a serial killer, wrote in letters. Jack the Ripper was a serial killer who maybe wrote in letters. And with the From Hell letter from Jack the Ripper, that's accompanied by half of a kidney. Now, the
Yeah.
Zodiac couldn't cut out Paul Stein's kidney. He probably didn't even know how.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't even do something like that. It'd be ridiculous. And, the amount of effort that that would take, not to mention he would easily be caught
Yeah.
with, blood on his clothes. Obviously, he's not going to do that. But what he could do is cut off a piece of Paul Stein's shirt from the lower backside, the way that the kidney is on
Mm.
the lower back. And, it's, I was really absolutely in line with that. That was my theory about why the Zodiac did what he did. He wanted to be Jack the Ripper, but to outdo Jack the Ripper. I had to take a step back from that because I really had to admit that there's just insufficient evidence. I mean, did he know about Jack the Ripper? Probably, but
Yeah.
I really don't know if he was using the Ripper as a playbook like I thought in the past. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely the whole lower back thing. That is a good hypothesis for it because I don't think Zodiac was wiping the cab down for prints so much as he might have been collecting blood with the shirt. But of course, you have some weird. He's wiping down outside parts of the door. That's like a thought experiment. It's just I don't know. It would account for it, but when you were saying that, just imagine him walking down the street with Paul Stein's kidney when Falk drives by. It's like,
If he were to actually cut out Paul Stein's kidney, I mean, he would have been caught instantly that night.
yeah,
For starters, the amount of time that that would have taken. Jack the Ripper went after women who were mostly in isolated areas, not like in Presidio Heights, where you could be witnessed by anybody in the houses. We're talking about down the streets in near total darkness sometimes. And, like a lot of the streets where Jack the Ripper was operating were not well lit. I mean, the Robbins kids saw the Zodiac clearly enough, right?
yeah.
So did Falcon Zelms, and no, of course I don't think the Zodiac would actually cut out his kidney. I guess I was just providing the reasons why not, and why he would take the piece of the shirt, take his knife, make one cut, pull, tear, rip, tear, cut down. Maybe he used the knife 3 times to start the cuts, but it seems like it was actually torn, right? It was ripped and torn as opposed to cut the whole way with a knife, right?
I've heard that, but it's not along a seam, is it?
It doesn't look like it's torn. When you look at
Yeah,
Paul Stein's shirt,
it looks
it
knifed.
looks like it was cut with a knife. And Ross and Michael Cole were talking about this on Planet X Filmworks about like what's the story about the witness Lindsay Robbins saying that he could see the glint of the knife that was being used on Paul Stein. And this is something that came from when Lindsay Robbins was interviewed by Jim Dean. And Jim Dean conducted an interview and shared the information with Mike Rodelli, author of In the Shadow of Mount Diablo. And Lindsay Robbins did say that to Jim Dean. Jim Dean even forgot about it. And when the quotation was shared to him, he's like, yeah, those are definitely my words. That's how I talk and how I phrase my questions, but I don't remember saying it. Mike Rodelli had also even forgotten about that Lindsay Robbins said that he could see the glint of the knife. I think the knife was used on Paul Stein's shirt. That's just what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. Those are very clean cuts. And when people rip a shirt, I know there's been some discussion about whether that shirt's ripped or torn. When you rip fabric, you got to pretty much follow the seam. So you could get a start cut on that shirt, and then as you start ripping, it's going to follow that shirt seam. And I don't think we have that with Stein. It looks like
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it looks like 3 laborious knife cuts, and it just, how long did that take? I mean, yeah, even that little maneuver right there is. He was at that crime scene for a little extra time, which is kind of weird.
Yes. And that's ultimately what almost got him caught, right? I
Yeah.
mean, because that's why we have the composite sketch, which you, more so than anyone, have kind of debunked the validity of the composite sketch. And I mean, it really is a hindrance rather than something helpful. Of course, we want
Definitely.
composites. We want to know what the killer looked like, but no, it's not useful. It's just an ordinary white male with a generic face that apparently looks like
Mm.
Arthur Lee Allen, Richard Guykowski, and Ted Kaczynski.
Every white
And
male.
every white male, it doesn't look anything like Kaczynski. I just brought he came to
Yeah.
mind. But then, he walks away. He's not almost stopped by Falcon Zones. Kind of just got lucky.
Yeah.
And then he disappeared. All right, though. If we're talking about Zodiac, I really thought we were going to focus on Cheri Jo Bates, but I do have to ask you this.
I start running
Where
out.
do you think the Zodiac went after the Falk sighting? Do you think he went into the Presidio? Do you think he went into the houses? Do you think he was hiding in the alcoves of the houses and then made an escape? What do you think the Zodiac did?
Oh, yeah. I've previously considered the possibility that the proximity of the Stein murder to the Presidio itself was a red herring to trick us into thinking that he went through that park. If he went through that park, I don't understand why the dogs didn't find him. I'm not sure where the dogs led the police, but one really excellent place to observe that whole police response and then write about it in the bus bomb letter would be from inside one of those buildings near the crime scene. And of course, he is 100% safe because law enforcement would need a warrant to enter any of those houses. Had he gone through the Presidio, he might have been caught. But it's so hard to say. Like, that's a risky maneuver to run through that park because it's nighttime and there's really nobody there.
What do you think about Officer Falk's multiple testimonies about what the Zodiac was doing, going into the park and walking up the stairs to the house? What do you think?
Was that Falk that said that or Pelicetti that?
Officer Falk originally said that he saw the suspect going into the park by the Presidio, but then in 2007 for the documentary, this is the Zodiac speaking, he then changed it to say that he saw the suspect walking up the stairs toward the houses, not like in the house, entering the house, but walking up the stairs.
So those are two really different things.
Oh, yes, and openly on Black Box Online Radio, I personally said I'm tired of talking about Officer Falk and his contradictions and his inconsistencies. Yeah. And, I mean, my personal stance is he has no credibility. Mm-hmm. I don't know why he's giving these different stories. I don't know if he just got confused. Because people do that. Not everyone remembers everything. But that's my take on the subject, so I was curious what you thought about it.
Yeah, and Falk's not a detective. He's a patrol op. He's a police officer who's driving along, and people don't want to accept this, but it's not really a police officer's job to figure out, hey, where'd this guy? Let's follow his tracks and that's for detectives and homicide inspectors. And
but now wait a second. Yeah. I think I heard on New Cokes once that you said that still Officer Falk did an enormous disservice by not coming forward with the information earlier, right? Like, even though everything you said is true, but he still should have done that and come forward with this. And I have no idea on the date he actually did. And there was this one thing that was put forward that maybe he actually did come forward after the Stein murder, and then they just dated the memo later on because he didn't type it himself. Like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? I'm tired of talking about Officer Falk because I think that he has done disservice.
Muddies the waters.
I definitely think that he has muddied the waters. Absolutely. And he prevents us from getting to the heart of the issue. I mean, if you change your story that drastically about where somebody was going, how big were they, and what were they doing? Did you talk to them or did you not talk to them? Did they point you in the wrong direction or did you not say anything at all?
Yeah.
He has flip-flopped on all of those things. And why? No one suspects him of any wrongdoing.
Definitely not.
Like, literally, no one suspects him of any wrongdoing. Maybe you are right about something that, like, it wasn't his job to remember all that stuff, so he wasn't thinking like a detective.
Yeah, we're putting a lot of pressure on, like, Falk should know more or should have had a more accurate assessment. And but yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that his account of what happened that night is accurate, and I didn't even know he had changed his story from running into the Presidio to then going into the building. Those are two way different things, totally opposite direction, totally opposite environment.
And to be clear, walking up the stairs of the houses, I mean, I don't think I ever heard Fox say that he saw him entering a specific house.
Mm-hmm.
One theory, though, that was presented to me that I thought was really interesting was that after the Stein murder, the Zodiac was hiding in the alcoves of the houses. Like, it doesn't mean that he lived in Presidio Heights, but rather that, like the way the houses would be structured, there's a little space that would be in the front of them. It's kind of like going around a wall, like around the corner, and he's just kind of like hiding there, kind of like waiting until the coast is clear, and then he went who knows what direction.
Very risky because I'm sure law enforcement was on that crime scene at least the rest of the night and into the morning. And so when would it be safe to come out of that alcove? Because you risk the canines tracking you, you risk the door-to-door canvas just walking up on you. And I think that there was somebody else who saw a stocky man run into the Julius Kahn playground, right?
Yeah, I think so too. And we also have the 8-year-old witness who saw the Zodiac,
Rebecca.
like from the window and identified him as Xenophone Anthony. So there are quite a few witnesses that were out that night. But I'm really just not sure where the Zodiac ended up. However, I really want to ask this question again on Zodiac Monday because I really didn't get any responses from people. Again, this is another one from Michael Cole. And Vincent, what do you think about this? Michael Cole argues that the Zodiac did not live in Presidio Heights for the following reason. When he wrote in the letter, he said, "This is the Zodiac speaking. I'm the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington and Maple." Right? Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And the taxi, of course, went to Washington and Cheri, right?
Yeah.
In the logbook, Paul Stein wrote down Washington and Maple. So it appears that the Zodiac instructed him to go to Washington and Maple. Yet somehow they end up on Washington and Cheri. Okay, but the Zodiac said, "I'm the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington and Maple." Does that not suggest that he didn't live in Presidio Heights and that he mapped the thing out? Because if he lived there and he walked those streets every day or nearly every day, wouldn't he have just said Washington and Cheri if he was familiar with the area? Or does it sound like this is somebody who plotted this plan on a map? All right, I'm going to get, Mason and Gary. I'm going to get the taxi to Washington and Maple. Then I'm going to get out, maybe do what you said, go toward the Presidio, but then I'm going to sneak off to my getaway vehicle, bicycle, whatever, and go across the bridge into Sausalito. What do you think?
Only possible workaround to that I saw in this, Tom Voight said this, is that what if the first line of that letter was written before the murder in advance? And that he wrote, "I'm the murderer of a taxi driver over by Washington and Maple," then instructed Paul Stein to go Washington and Maple, but then events occurred, got him to Cheri. That's one of those huge mysteries in the Paul Stein murder, is why is the cab at Washington and Cheri? And I've seen the craziest things said about that. I've seen John Douglas, I think, say that Zodiac was like co-piloting the car, and maybe even Paul Holes has said some crazy stuff like that. Where
Zodiac, lots of people have said the co-piloting the car thing. Yeah.
That's, maybe, but that's wild.
Do you mean that like Paul Stein didn't know that he was going to get shot, so the Zodiac shot him, and then he grabs the wheel and is kind of like trying to maneuver this thing over to a stopping position when you say co-piloting the car?
So chaotic and so risky for him to do that. He could have crashed. Who knows, what could have really gone down there. But
I don't think that would be necessary, actually. I mean, just kind of thinking off the top right now. Because when a taxi driver lets you out, I mean, normally they come to a place that is going to be a little bit suitable to let somebody out of the car. And even if he's in the middle of this street, then, I mean, would it really be that necessary that the Zodiac would have to co-pilot the car as opposed to grabbing the emergency brake or something? And I don't really know all the specs on the inside of Paul Stein's taxi, but that seems a little bit excessive. But I have heard that from numerous people, so I'll give it to them.
Yeah, what a weird. That's so weird. Why is the cab at Washington and Cherry that old mystery? I think that's we may never
Well,
know.
maybe Michael Cole is right that it's like, hey, pull over here. I like this getaway. I like this street for a particular reason. And no, what is it? Gareth Penn. Gareth Penn said the fire hydrant. He wanted to get as close to the fire hydrant as possible because of water.
Oh yeah, there's a mathematical equation that leads you
Bodies of
toward the
water
fire.
connection.
Oh man, that's yeah. It's as tenuous as Washington being the water connection too. So, um,
Well, he chose to go on national television and share that with everybody, so Gareth does what Gareth does.
yeah.
I would still love to interview Gareth Penn if I could. I don't think I'm going to get a chance to, actually. And he has kind of disappeared from the public sphere, minus his X account. And I don't really think he wants to talk about the Zodiac anymore, and I just don't think it's going to happen. But anyway, I guess he holds his place in history.
I would love for Rebecca Robbins to start talking to us more.
Do you think she's going to be able to, in terms of like recalling things?
Hard to say, but at least it would be nice to have her thoughts on record on things. Like, even if we can't put too much stock in a witness description, it would be really valuable to hear from her at least something. And I think it's weird that, I mean, why not at least, even if we don't expect you to have a good recollection of what this guy looked like why would you not? Maybe we could figure a way to get her on something, because
I mean, with Brian Hartnell, as I understood, like people are saying they want Brian Hartnell to listen to recordings of their suspect's voice, and he has just simply said that he is no longer able to remember what it sounded like. It was 56 years ago,
long time.
and the same thing with the DB Cooper flight attendants who actually saw DB Cooper. They're like, it's been too many years. I can't remember what he looked like. And I don't fault the witnesses at all. I mean,
Yeah,
they didn't ask for this.
definitely.
Brian Hartnell is even a surviving victim from being stabbed by the Zodiac. And I also just do not think that he's doing anything wrong, but I understand it. If he can't remember what somebody sounded like. Now, he did say that he could at the time, and ruled out Eric Weil, but I think that's ultimately where we have to leave it there.
Yeah.
But I was really thinking we were going to do more things about Riverside. Should we do some more Bates questions, or do you have something else you want to talk about with Presidio Heights?
Yeah, we'll go back on Bates if you have some questions on there, and then
Do you think Bob Barnett did it?
supposedly not. Didn't they test his DNA?
Yes, but what do you think?
I mean, as long as if the DNA sequencing of the killer's DNA profile was done correctly, and I think law enforcement knows how to sequence DNA, and they ran the DNA and it doesn't check out, then I mean he's ruled out. But we have to be sure, of course, that DNA science was executed correctly.
Now, Cheri Jo was engaged to Dennis Highland, who was a student at SFSU in the North. Do you think she continued a relationship with Bob Barnett when she was in Riverside?
Hard to say, and I didn't know she was engaged to someone who was in San Francisco at that time.
Yeah, San Francisco State University.
Wow. Where was he on the night of October 31st, 1966? That's what I want to know.
San Francisco, as far as I can recall.
Wow. I like DNA. So if the DNA says it's not Bob Barnett, as long as that DNA was done right, we have to accept that. And people like
now, what Ken Maines proposed in his Unsolved No More episode is that there's a statement from a friend that Cheri Jo was still dating someone. I'm trying to think if it actually said she was dating Bob Barnett. It's been a while. But Ken Maines was proposing that might have been a polite old slang term for having casual sex. No fault of Cheri Jo. She didn't deserve to be murdered.
Of course not.
And she might have still been seeing Bob Barnett. And it's so easy to blame him. That, this is just an ex-boyfriend, a jealousy angle. Come on, leave Dennis. Come back to me. But, if DNA isn't it, then DNA isn't it. One theory was even that he had an accomplice, and the two of them blindsided Cheri Jo, and that's why the forensics are all over the map. But, I mean, is there evidence of that? Or that sounds like, trying to make a theory work
Yeah.
because it doesn't work. I mean, you have to insert imaginary person X to get the theory to work. Um, any other major suspects? I guess I could ask you about Richard Hoffman. Do you think Richard Hoffman murdered Cheri Jo Bates?
Absolutely not. I don't think Richard Hoffman has.
RH is on the desktop poem. RH, Richard Hoffman.
I think Richard Hoffman. It's good you bring him up because Druser has said this. Richard Hoffman is like the only guy in Zodiac world that we can actually tangibly rule out from from Blue Rock Springs, because we know where he was when the phone call was made, and we know where the Zodiac was when the phone call was made, and those are not the same place. And no, Richard Hoffman has been just getting slandered through the mud by the mainstream media and this J-Foy guy, and it's like, dude, no, we know but our age, more synchronicities, got to be. And there's no proof that the desktop poem is even related to Cheri Jo at all.
And I was surprised when Michael Cole even said he didn't think it was related. He connects a lot of the dots to unconnected crimes on his own. But for me, I've never thought that the desktop poem was related to the Bates murder. Yeah. I think Soren Korsgaard did a very good breakdown of this in his book, America's Jack the Ripper, when he's like, number one, it's not even talking about murder. Number
Suicide.
Two, it's talking about a girl in a red dress. Cheri Jo wasn't wearing a red dress. Number three, it says she won't die this time. Well, Cheri Jo did die that time. You'd have to be really messing with the timelines. We don't know when it was written. Mm-hmm. We don't know what RH stands for. Okay, now this is our opportunity to talk. So what do you think about my hypothesis that RH is a pen name? It is a pseudonym that was created by somebody. You know, like how authors use pen names, but they're not going to write the full thing out, and they're not going to use their real initials. Like, I mean, if you were to put graffiti on a desk at school, are you going to sign it with VM or something? Or are you going to make something up like RH? I'm not going to write ND. I'm going to write like RH because it's a pen name, but it's not my legal name, and it wouldn't be traced back to me. An aspiring writer who thought of something morbid. They did it maybe out of frustration, but mostly just about late teenage angst, I suppose. That's kind of the same as frustration. And then that's all it is.
What
do you think?
I've heard a good hypothesis that the desktop poem is actually about an attempted suicide.
I agree. I think that's exactly what it's about. Yeah. It's about some type of self-mutilation event that is supposed to lead to suicide. Blood is spilling all over her dress. Oh, well, it was red anyway. She won't die this time. Someone will find her. Just wait till next time. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, that is such
a suicide. That
is
not talking about murder. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to say that it's talking about murder, you have to be dealing with some real figurative language and metaphorical issues. And firstly, there's only one character in that story. That's the girl. And well, I'm just trying to get all the words. Sick of living, unwilling to die, blood spilling, dripping, squirting all over her dress. Oh, well, it was red anyway. She won't die this time. Just wait until next time. What's in the middle? I think I skipped a line. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it definitely doesn't sound like it's talking about murder to me. So I definitely lean toward the suicide, self-mutilation angle. But then, Vincent, what do you think about the Riverside confession?
Oh, I just saw someone tear that up, and I don't remember who it was, but they were mentioning that like the details of the confession letter don't actually match the crime scene.
Campus killings?
What do you mean?
Oh, no, the podcast. I posted a link in the Zodiac Killer library.
Should we read the confession, or at least part? How long is it?
Oh, you got to do that in your most twisted voice.
Okay, let's see. What's a most twisted voice?
Because you're going to notice that the flow of this writing gets more and more maniacal.
Yeah, okay, so here is the... Should we read desktop poem or confession or both?
Oh, confession. Okay. Absolutely.
All right, the confession letter, because I typed desktop poem because I don't know how to type. Confession letter, Riverside. All right. She was young and beautiful, but now she is battered and dead. She is not the first, and she will not be the last. I lay awake nights thinking about my next victim. Maybe she will be the beautiful blonde that babysits near the little store and walks down the dark alley each evening at about 7. Or maybe she will be the shapely, blue-eyed brunette that said no when I asked her for a date in high school. But maybe it will not be either, but I shall cut off her female parts and deposit them for the whole city to see. So don't... What the heck? Make it easy for me. Keep your sisters, daughters, and wives off the streets and alleys. Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. She did not put up a struggle. Oh, because I believe Bates did put up a struggle, didn't she? We have the watch and the fight and the...
Yes.
But I did. It was a ball. I first pulled the middle wire from the distributor. Then I waited for her in the library and followed her out after about 2 minutes. The battery must have been about dead by then. I then offered to help. She was then very willing to talk with me. I told her that my car was down the street and that I would give her a lift home. When we were away from the library walking, I said it was about time. She asked me about time for what. I said it was about time for her to die. I grabbed her around the neck with my hand over her mouth and my other hand with a small knife at her throat. She went very willingly. Her breast felt very warm and firm under my hands, but only one thing was on my mind, making her pay for the brush-offs that she had given me during the years prior. She died hard. She squirmed and shook as I choked her, and her lips twitched. She let out a scream once, and I kicked her head to shut her up. I plunged the knife into her, and it broke. Do we have a knife segment from the crime scene?
I think so.
Okay. I then finished the job by cutting her throat. I am not sick. Yeah, you are. I am insane, but that will not stop the game. This letter should be published for all to read. It just might save that girl in the alley, but that's up to you. It will be on your conscience, not mine. Yes, I did make that call to you also. It was just a warning. Beware, I am stalking your girls now. Carbon copy, Chief of Police Enterprise. I don't think that reads like Zodiac.
Oh no, absolutely not. When did the Zodiac ever call out victims by name?
Yeah.
When did the Zodiac say that he was mad about brush-offs? The Zodiac is talking about metaphysical stuff like I'm going to be a god in paradise. Paraphrasing. Yeah. He's going to be royalty in paradise is what he's saying, and that he's going to have slaves that are going to work for him. The Zodiac is saying stuff that is definitely not concerned with the actions and activities of girls. The Zodiac says killing is better than getting your rocks off with a girl.
Yeah.
So was it the shapely brunette or the blonde girl? Like, the Zodiac's in full of these teenage hormones. Did he change in 2.5 years? Maybe, but I've always thought the Riverside Confession had different language.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have the use of the word twitch, the use of the word squirm, and the twitch word is misspelled, right? And it's misspelled the same way the Zodiac did, right?
I think so. Let's see. Twitch. Where is that?
I think that's a reasonable point, but we also need to remember, I was going to bring this up about similarities. A similarity is that this person said, I am the one who called you. You just read that off?
Yeah.
That's also quite similar to the Zodiac phone calls and letters, confessions, details. But by the way, Vincent, you with me?
Yeah. It's such a sexually motivated letter.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You know,
I want to stab women and feel their breasts. Zodiac is not sexually motivated.
Yeah.
Now, Vincent, I just got this notification from ZodiacKiller.com, September 4th, 2025. Did you see that?
No, this is brand new. It's breaking news, guys.
Breaking news while we're on the air. Arthur Lee Allen, the missing evidence. It appears that Arthur Lee Allen's Zodiac watch was confiscated by the police during the famous raid on his home, and now the watch is missing and officially listed as stolen. Someone has stolen Arthur Lee Allen's watch from the police archives. This is not the breaking news that I was hoping for.
Yeah. I was hoping a positive identification.
I have something about the DNA, but not good news out of Vallejo. Why would somebody do that? Why would somebody steal Arthur Lee Allen's watch? They must be broke.
It's concerning me that I've previously said I thought it would be funny for someone to rappel into the evidence room at the SFPD and steal all the Zodiac holdback to release it. Looks like someone took that a little too seriously and stole Arthur Lee Allen's watch.
They're not even going to do anything with it. They're just going to keep it in a box. I doubt they're even going to wear it. Useless humans. But that's the kind of Zodiac news that we are settling for these days. By the way, though, I think it's really interesting that you found a program that was debunking the Riverside confession when, just prior to this episode, I was listening to Campus Killings, a podcast from Abjack Entertainment, that was talking about that. Because, I mean, I was thinking that we were going to talk about Cheri Jo, so I decided to listen to a program, and I'll share more on Zodiac Monday, but that was my biggest takeaway from them, is that they just thought that all of these details about the crime were taken from the papers. This person didn't actually do it, and all of the communications in the Bates murder were hoaxes, in their opinion. And I am like 99% the desktop poem is a hoax, 89% that the Bates had to die letters were hoaxes, and the Riverside confession only about maybe 10% a hoax. I really do think there's a high chance it was from the killer, but I mean, somebody's confessing to the murder. If that's a prank, that's a pretty good one. The Bates had to die letters in 1967, those pranks are stupid.
Much
Bates
easier.
had to die, there will be more.
Very easy to do that. But
I mean, there's no idea in there. It's just it's a silly taunt and threat. And weren't they written on like lined paper or something? It's not even an honest effort.
yeah, there will be more. That is very similar to the wording in the confession of how he's going to be killing more. Is there a part that says there will be more directly, or?
Yes, in the three Bates had to die letters that were mailed in 1967.
Do we
Two
also
of them
have
say
that?
Bates had to die, there will be more, and they're signed with the squiggly Z. One of them says she had to die, there will be more, and signed with the Z, because that was mailed to Cheri Jo's father, Joseph Bates, and his name was also Bates, so it would be more appropriate to say she had to die, there will be more. And forgive me if I already asked you, do you believe that those are hoaxes?
Well, I think they did identify the guy, right? Eventually.
Well, the full story, as I understand it, and I've heard this from everyone, is that he came forward. Some guy wrote a letter in 2016 saying, "Oh yeah, those three Bates had to die letters. Well, I'm the hoaxer. I made those up. I fabricated them when I was a teenager. I was a troubled teen, and I was, had emotional problems." And he hoaxed them. And they tracked the guy down from DNA evidence that was from the envelope, or something to do with the 2016 letter. I shouldn't say the envelope because that would be speculative. But they tracked the guy down, they found him. They determined that he was not the killer of Cheri Jo Bates and not the Zodiac. Now, we don't know his name. I have a suspect. But what I was told is that they didn't actually use any DNA or any forensic evidence to verify that his confession was truthful. Did he actually hoax the letters? I mean, I think so. 50 years later, he's admitting to that. I think he did. But then, like, the doubters are just saying, no, they never actually verified it. They just took his word for it. And yes, Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com said that clear as day. I don't know, what do you think?
Every time we mention Tom Voigt in this case, I just can't wrap my head around or understand why he's listed her as this official victim. Does he know something we don't know? I mean, because that's a major thing. It's almost like he staked his reputation on this claim. Like, there's a lot of pressure on Tom Voigt to say the things that are as true as he can, because he's really the mascot or the figurehead of. He owns ZodiacKiller.com, for example, and so to make that claim, that's a very serious claim to make. What does he have, man?
I don't know, but there is evidence that Cheri Jo Bates was a Zodiac victim, but I think there's a lot more evidence that she wasn't. And at the end of the day, we're probably going to find out that Cheri Jo was not a Zodiac victim. No. The Zodiac did not write the desktop poem, did not write the Bates had to die letters, and even though I really can lean, I have a lot of suspicions about the confession. At the end of the day, he probably didn't write the confession either. Although, out of all of the Riverside communications, I think that one has the highest probability of being from the killer, the Riverside confession. And ultimately, but like, I wouldn't be surprised for a second if you told me, yeah, the Zodiac didn't write any of those. I'd be like, all right.
Yeah.
if you if you told me the Zodiac wrote the desktop poem and it's been verified, I would say I'm
Me
surprised, but
too.
I'll accept the result.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, can I ask you, Vincent, what do
Yep.
you think about Sherwood Morrell's interpretations of the writing? Do you think that Sherwood Morrell knew what he was doing? Do you think he was a quack? Do you think he was messed up? Do you think he was clueless? Do you think that he was spot on? What do you think?
I think there's too much evidence to suggest that Zodiac was modifying his handwriting to really put so much stock in these handwriting analyses. We have character formation of certain letters and characters of each letter that show at sometimes he was writing a lowercase d one way, other times he was writing it a different way. Sometimes he circle dotted his eyes, sometimes he dot dotted his eyes. There's these weird variations in that handwriting where I would be very careful about saying, oh, I would recognize his handwriting on a bank slip. It's too easy to fake your handwriting. And I suspect that's exactly why the Zodiac handwrote those letters. I think he specifically wanted to modify his handwriting so that it could be used to rule him out later.
I can give you about 99% undeniable proof that the Zodiac modified his handwriting.
Gotta have it.
99%,
Let's
not
get it.
100.
Oh,
Map. He's writing very neat. The Zodiac is writing the debut letter very sloppily. He wrote the envelope to the postcard, but the address is somewhere in the middle. And at the very least, he is focusing more on trying to be neat or trying to be messy and he's being careless. But that does suggest that it's done intentionally.
yeah.
And I don't even know if that's open for discussion. Absolutely, the Zodiac was modifying his handwriting. And I think you have reasons for. I think you want it to be neat when he's writing to Melvin Belli because, if he wrote just some dorky thing like, I am the murderer of the two teenagers when the letters are kind of just falling off the page, Melvin Belli would be like, this dude's a putz. I'm not going to talk to him. Okay, he's trying to be neat because he recognized that Melvin Belli is famous, or he was at the time. Now, with the other things, I think he was being neat on the Dragon card to fit the words where he wanted them, and on the Phillips 66 map because he wanted the instruction to be very clear, set to magnetic north. What do you think?
Yeah, and look how powerful that handwriting stuff has been, because whether or not it's Alan or whoever it is, you see on Reddit all the time someone says, well, that guy was ruled out because his handwriting didn't match. And what a perfect way, if it's that easy, to get yourself ruled out, is just fake your handwriting. And then when they test it, everybody on Reddit runs with it for the next half century. And
how would you respond to somebody like Prash, who wrote the book, The Zodiac Killer, A Brief Investigation, when he just flat out said, I don't want to hear about these handwriting experts. Handwriting experts aren't really using methods that are that superior to the average person.
yeah.
And I know they measure the angles, they look for certain markings, like how much pressure you're putting on the paper when you start your letter H and so on. I know that they're doing other things, but I tend to mostly go in that direction. I'm sure they have a few tricks that are pretty good. I think some people could be good at it, but there probably got a lot of amateurs that could also be good at it. So in that regard, maybe he's correct that they aren't really using methods that wouldn't be available to the general public.
Yeah, especially now with the computer softwares we have, almost anyone can measure angles. Now, if Zodiac had an underlying template, what we know about Drew Beeson's light table hypothesis and Graysmith, if he was doing something like that where it forced the positioning of these letters, like you have graph paper underneath, for example, and you write each letter in a graph square or with some sort of arbitrary placement relative to those graph squares, then the relation from one character to the other could be completely falsified, and it would be very easy to do it. So yeah, I kind of agree with him. It's a really shoddy way of doing it.
It sounds like you support the light table theory. I think you were the one who said, "Hey, Tom Boyd, if that's not the light table, I'll eat my shirt." Right?
Yeah. Yeah, the ciphers.
Most likely.
Most likely. The ciphers.
What do you think about Graysmith's idea that the Zodiac was using a projector?
I like it, but I might like it just because I have the same suspect as Gray Smith, essentially, and he's a school teacher, so it leans towards
Yeah,
having that.
school teachers loved projectors
Yeah.
back in the day. I don't know what they do now. They probably have electronic whiteboards, but
Yeah.
we didn't have any of that when I was in school. They loved the projectors.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, I'm not a Graysmith fan. I don't know how much of my stuff you've heard on that. And I kind of view Graysmith as more of a nemesis, a foe to the Zodiac world, than a than someone who helped. I think that he did a lot of things because he thought he wasn't going to get caught and he would never be exposed.
Man.
But so when he comes up with when he's sharing his hypotheses and he's really trying to share his original ideas about what he thinks happened, or also defending some more far out claims. Because I don't know who started the projector claim. I'm just so skeptical, and I'm just like, I don't trust you. Bye.
Let me see if I have the. This is the thing that really makes me think that this is, if I can find it, at least with the ciphers, I have something called like 340 with grid or something. Yeah, here we go. 340 monochrome with graph. I think it's that. I know Ned can't see that, but he'll see it, I guess, on the upload. But here we have the Z340 with the graph paper laid underneath it, and we're seeing it's such a perfect alignment of all these characters. Something was going on, and I think most likely what it is he might have had like a glass coffee table, and he just put a sheet of 5mm graph paper, which is the most common graph paper, underneath a piece of paper.
And
really,
a flashlight, maybe.
yeah, it's a very reasonable way to do it. Projectors, you start getting a little more advanced, and then I've seen some stuff with R.P. Ackerman on his site zodiacconfess.wordpress.com where he thinks there was micro printing involved and like some really far out stuff that I think is really reaching. But those ciphers, they were aligned somehow.
Right, and like somebody who listens to my program just wrote in saying that, whoa, I used to do that stuff, but I didn't need a light table. I just also had the glass table like you mentioned,
Yeah.
and I rigged a flashlight under it so I could do it. But that still counts as a light table in my book. It's just kind of what we would call a DIY light table, or it's Jimmy rig, to use some West Virginia speak.
Ghetto.
And I mean, that's what it is, rigging it yourself so you can have those types of operations.
Yeah.
But ultimately, yes, I think some type of light table was used on the ciphers. It could have been used to modify certain letters. I think that it's possible that maybe some of the hoaxers were taking either copies of letters or maybe things from the paper and doing that, trying to get certain words printed in a certain way. And I don't know how true that is. That's mostly guesswork on my part, though.
Zodiac was very theatrical, and I think he really liked visual things and the alignment of those ciphers and the aesthetic of them. It really makes him look like, for lack of better words, leet. To have this perfectly aligned cipher blocks of text. He was such a theatrical guy that really any possibility goes with modifying and
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would like to know, what do you think about the Zodiac's choices to include all of these theatrical references, comic book references, books and story references? On the next Zodiac Monday, I'm going to talk a lot more about the Zodiac's possible inspirations from Edgar Allan Poe. Skating Crow Productions did an excellent presentation on how the Zodiac could have been inspired by T.S. Eliot. Very specific things where it's not just like, okay, well, this is a little bit similar. I mean, it actually looks like the Zodiac may have been reading the stuff like the man is the most dangerous animal of all. That's most likely a reference to some variant of the most dangerous game. What do you think about the Zodiac including all of that stuff in his letters and ciphers? Do you think that he just had no one else to talk to? Do you think that he was someone who was just trying to create his own persona, but he had to get the ideas from somewhere? Do you think he was an autistic sociopath who just had to create this because he didn't know how to communicate and couldn't be original? Like, what do you really think happened?
Well, it's weird because we see so many possible sources of inspiration. We see like Count Zaroff of the Most Dangerous Game, and then we have like the Charlie Chan at Treasure Island, and then we also have the Zodiac Watch, where the logo and the name are all. I mean, there's so many possible sources of inspiration. Was it all of them, or are we finding some of them, and then there's also some radiation mixed in where, maybe Treasure Island isn't related, or maybe Most Dangerous Game isn't related? Because he doesn't actually say Most Dangerous Game. He says the most dangerous animal of all. Is the only similarity there the most dangerous? Because people say that all the time.
If I had to bet my life on it, I'd say that's a reference to one of them. There are other ones that it could be referencing, like the film Bloodlust from 1961, which is a parody of the most dangerous game. I don't know if parody is the right word, but like it's a
Homage.
it's a variant of the story. I mean, like it's a retelling of the story, but same story. And Ray Grant has also talked about other examples of the most dangerous game in his book, and I think that that's one spot on. I wouldn't be completely shocked if the Zodiac was not familiar with Charlie Chan at Treasure Island. A little bit though, because you have a serial killer named Dr. Zodiac who sends letters. And at first, I noticed this when I watched the movie, they start out by calling him Zodiac and not Dr. Zodiac. But we also have the story Signed Z by Edwin Baird that has a serial killer named Z. And his signature line is, "This is Z calling." Detective Story
weird?
Magazine, 1921. I don't know, like, or do these things just happen because of history, because of chance?
Yeah, there's so many books and movies made that maybe things just line up. I mean, it's accidental.
Like, I don't know if you saw the recent Zodiac Monday where I was talking about the film Shock Press from 1949, but that is one where it has a husband and wife that go on the run. They're trying to get to Mexico. They steal cars to get to Mexico. And, like the Zodiac at Lake Berryessa, all I want's her money, I'm just trying to get to Mexico. But the Zodiac says that he's from the prison in Montana, right?
Maybe
But
Colorado.
then Bryant said, maybe Colorado.
Yeah.
And the husband and wife get their story mixed up when one of them says, "I thought we were saying we were from Montana." "No, I told you Colorado."
That's so weird.
Like they're actually arguing about the cover story. One of them saying Montana, one saying Colorado, and I'm like, is that just a coincidence, or did the Zodiac slip that into his discussion? Where
Whoa,
it's kind of like very clearly the Zodiac is doing a lot of things at Lake Berryessa. There's no scene in Shock Press where the Zodiac is wearing, or the characters are wearing hooded costumes or anything, and with circles and crosses, but those events happen, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe he's just recalling all of the movies he ever watched and slowly dropping little hints.
yeah, that's wild. Because the odds of that have to be so low, because it wasn't like, I mean, maybe Zodiac said something to sow that uncertainty into the conversation, but it's like that's a mistake on Brian Hartnell's end. Like, did he remember Colorado or Montana? And the fact that lines up with another, that's so weird.
Not if the Zodiac said both of them.
Yeah, true.
Like if you actually said I escaped from prison in Colorado. Where did you say? Montana. Not if you did it on purpose.
Yeah. Wow. Really weird. And I know we've had Ned on right now, 1 hour and 43 minutes. That's I think the longest little show we've done together, and I know we could pour over these things forever, but as we begin closing out, I want to, Ned, do you think we're ever going to identify this guy?
First, I have one correction. I knew I misstated the movie. It wasn't Shock Press. It was Shock Proof. I just had to Google Shock Proof 1949. It has the Montana, Colorado, I'm just trying to get to Mexico angle. Shock Proof. And to answer your question, are we just going to get this guy? I'm pessimistic.
Me too.
And Vincent, I was optimistic for years.
Me too.
And the reason why is on Black Box Online Radio, my YouTube channel and podcast, I talk about unsolved mysteries. And I've noticed that the more I get into the high-profile unsolved mysteries, some of them have a very low likelihood of being solved.
Yeah.
And the Zodiac has a low chance. There's not a lot of physical evidence. There isn't a very big lead that has been made available to the general public. The authorities aren't shouting from the rooftops about how we conclusively have the Zodiac's DNA.
Yeah.
We don't know if we have like the Zodiac's hair that's been left behind, like we did in the Cooper case, although the hair was lost,
Yeah.
the hair slide. And we also have questionable fingerprints. I mean, Dion Walker's presentation on the fingerprints on his channel, Dion Walker, Dion is Dion, and I think that that is something that is really valuable. Maybe we do have enough fingerprints from the little list letter where he can be identified, but I'm pessimistic more and more each day. I think I'm losing hope, and that sucks because
Yeah.
for years I was an optimist. Like, no, it might happen. It might happen. People are asking me, "Are you going to do Zodiac Monday on Black Box Online Radio once the killer's identified?" And I'm like, "No, I was expecting to retire the segment." And of course, I would do some, coverage around the news story once it happened. I host the Zodiac Killer News Report on Black Box Online Radio, but I really think that there's a lower chance of this happening, and it could turn into a cold case like Jack the Ripper. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really it's like a rough realization that I come to, and at this point, because we've had so many circumstantial indicators with so many different people, that basically the only thing at this point that I can truly accept is DNA, and it doesn't appear that we have that. And it's concerning. I hope that we're both wrong in being cynical. I hope that we can get that positive identification, but it's not the same as we had with the original Night Stalker. We don't have these pristine DNA profiles, and I think without DNA, that guy never would have been caught. So,
But you see the differences, right? The original Night Stalker lingered at the crime scenes, and he was a sexual predator,
yeah.
and the Zodiac did none of that stuff. A little bit at Lake Berryessa, but any chance of getting DNA from Lake Berryessa has been destroyed. And I don't think that that's an outrageous statement on my part. The bindings were handled without gloves. The picnic blanket was handled by Dennis Land and moved all around before they could have done anything. Not even, I mean, we wouldn't even know if we could get DNA on that, but all of that was contaminated. And to give credit to Thomas Horan, he said the crime scene was destroyed.
Yeah.
I mostly agree. We do have the footprints from Lake Berryessa, but
You can't do anything with it.
you can't do anything with that. You can provide a little bit of clarity, but if anything, people just go off the rails with that, where they're like, "Oh, well, I knew somebody in the Air Force, and he wore wing walkers."
They all did.
Yeah, they were also sold at surplus stores.
Yeah.
And Vincent, watch this, watch this.
Yeah.
If I walk into your home and I steal your shoes, and then I walk away with them, then I have your shoes. No, I don't. That's a ridiculous example,
Yeah.
but things like that are possible. It doesn't mean that somebody was in the Air Force or that they were in the Navy or anything like that. Mostly, I do think the Zodiac had somewhat of a military background,
Me too.
but that's just on the side of probability. If you can give me a brilliant suspect that had no military background, I would be relatively okay with that.
Yeah. I think he had military background, but probably not a combat role.
Like Arthur Lee Allen.
Yeah, and like so many people too. I mean, there's in that era,
yeah.
everybody was in the military almost. I mean, it's just
That's just it. Like, in terms of probability, everyone was in the military.
Yeah.
And so many people would have had access to those wing walker shoes, and it doesn't really impress me too much about anything related to that. And somebody even contacted me. They're like, one of their pieces of evidence was that their suspect owned a dark blue windbreaker. And I'm like, what?
I have one of those.
Wrote that out in I wore one of those for 7 years, a dark navy blue windbreaker. But the fact that you think that's a piece of evidence, that stuff is not going to work.
Yeah, it's not.
And I really think that people shouldn't even put their time into stuff like owning wingwalker shoes or a dark-colored windbreaker. It's an ineffective research strategy.
This crime spree kind of needs an overhaul in looking for evidence in the right places. I mean, we might not have the Zodiac's DNA profile that we know of right now, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It could be in the upholstery of Paul Stein's cab. It could be on the shell casings. It could be on the little red hair found behind the stamp. And maybe our science just isn't at the point where we can isolate the mixture of DNA profiles from the various bindings. But I would love to just really go, like, say to law enforcement, like, we got to look certain places, and we have to really dig, like, get creative, think outside the box, think of where we might find the Zodiac's DNA, and then test those things. Because it's possible that there's a DNA profile hiding there, and I think that DNA science is far enough along where it doesn't necessarily require the best preservation of evidence. It might just be, but we don't know what they have and what they don't have, and DNA is king. DNA will solve cases like nothing else can, and maybe that exists somewhere, but we gotta look for it. And doing other things like looking for who owned a windbreaker is really not the right direction of inquiry. So,
I mean, yes, of course, I agree completely. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was when someone said that they might be able to obtain sweat DNA from Paul Stein's cab, where the Zodiac may have been seated.
that's my
If
butt
they
sweat
can,
theory.
that was yours.
I don't know if I know I developed it independently, but other people might have thought of it too. I
Oh
called it
wow, I didn't know you were the source of that one.
the butt sweat theory because he's sitting in that chair, and the back of your thighs sweat a lot. So it could be there. It could be in the seams and the stitching of that upholstery. And Tom Voight told me that the cab is a dead end, and that we don't have much from it.
I
don't know
mean,
if that's
in a
true.
public taxi, though, we'd have to know that it was actually from the man that we're looking for. And what if it turns out that Paul Stein also gave a ride for like an hour to some guy? Or, no, they would have had that in the logbook. But, like, what if it's just a different Caucasian male sat there and provided the sweat DNA? Defense attorneys love to tear apart things involving taxis. But I do
Yeah.
give you credit for that. I didn't know you were the source of that one because I appreciated the original thinking. And I mean, we also could have obtained fingerprints from some of the letters. And one of the things that I think needs to be reinforced is there are DNA fragments that are on the letters, but none of them have matched. So it's not like we have the same DNA found on like 3 or 4 letters.
Yeah.
That hasn't been done yet. If we are able to do that, then perhaps yes. And some things to be optimistic about. What if they can extract DNA from a smaller sample now? Like now they can extract DNA from nanograms and half of nanograms. What if it's something like a yoctogram? Like it might be something that is just a smaller unit of measurement that can like provide DNA evidence. The Zodiac should have left some DNA behind. Oh, Vincent, you might want to wind down. Do you mind if I
Yeah.
ask you one more
Let's do it.
question?
Here we go.
What do you think about suspects who voluntarily give DNA samples? Do you think that they should be thought less highly of because the Zodiac could never be certain that he didn't leave behind DNA?
Well, the Yorkshire Ripper, I think, was caught because they went around and collected DNA from like all the males in the area, and the guy willingly gave his DNA. So it's possible that the offender might not want us to give that DNA, but it's happened before. And either way, it doesn't matter too much because we can do that IgG now. So we can, as long as we have that DNA profile, all we got to do is build this family tree, and it's over for him. But we have to find that DNA, and also you mentioned DNA profiles on letters. I would like a DNA profile from a crime scene more than from a letter, because if you just get it from the letters, you still have those Thomas Henry Horns that are going to say, well, that's not really the killer's DNA, that's the letter writer's DNA. And while most of us would accept a DNA profile from a letter as being evidence, there are still going to be those voices that are going to say, it's just the letter writer. So I'd like it
And
from the
any
Stein cap.
partnership theory.
Yeah.
Any partnership theory.
Yeah.
Like the people that say that Don and Betty Hardin did this, or Glenn Wall, who wrote Zodiac Maniac, saying that the Zodiac Killer was William Thorson and his wife wrote the letters. Any partnership theory, like you should be like, okay, well, this was the letter writer and this person was not the killer, and that would suck. That'd be a horrible way to spend the next 10 years trying to convince people of this, something like that.
And they would nenever accept it because their mind's made up, so generally.
Well, like there's still the OJ Truther movements, the Kohberger
Pro-burgers.
Truther movement. I'm trying to avoid that word. You could probably tell I didn't want to say it pro-burgers. I said I would only say it once on Black Box Online Radio because I am genuinely disturbed by the stuff that they're putting forward. With OJ, I mean, I absolutely think OJ did it. I think he killed those people.
For sure.
But at the very least, I heard people out because, you know, I didn't follow the news coverage when it was happening because I was 6 years old. My bad. But with Bryan Kohberger, we saw the whole thing. We saw it play out. We saw all the evidence. I don't think anyone else did it.
Definitely not.
Why are they arguing it?
Yeah.
Why are they still saying?
Everybody go to Black Box Online Radio. Go subscribe to Ned Dehan. Every single Monday, he talks Zodiac Killer for like an hour or more. He also does Ripper Wednesdays. He does DB Cooper Fridays. So Ned's on top of a lot of these hot cold cases that we have going. And want to say big special thanks for Ned coming on the show. Hopefully all of our technical equipment worked out. I think that we're good on that. And then any closing remarks you want to make to the world about Zodiac, Cooper, Ripper, anything going on, and then I end the stream.
All right, well, Vincent, thank you so much for having me as a guest on your program and, wanting to do this back and forth thing where we ask each other questions.
It's cool. Yeah.
And yes, my name is Ned Dehan, also known as Black Box Ned. In addition to the shows that Vincent mentioned, I'm going to add this segment on Tuesdays about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann from Praia da Luz, Portugal. And on Thursdays, I've been talking about the Black Dahlia, the murder of Elizabeth Short from 1947. I also have lots of episodes on the murder of JonBenet Ramsey. And Drew Beeson was talking about this on the Zodcast, like how do people keep multiple cases straight in their head? My answer is I don't. I forget everything, and then I have to relearn it multiple times today. You saw me saying, I don't know. I don't remember. Like when Vincent's asking me a question.
A lot of info.
No, like 5 or 6 different unsolved mysteries. I don't remember it all. I do revise all the time. And on the weekends, I'm going to be releasing some bonus episodes. I'm the writer of a fiction series called The White Horse Killer Saga. And on the weekends, I release segments of the audiobook. The final story is called The White Horse and the Sun. It'll be available in audiobook format 100% for free on YouTube. If you're bored, you can listen to it on the weekends. And I'm going to go chill with the chickens and see what they're doing. Fascinating species.
Very vocal out there.
Everybody have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you, Ned. Goodbye to you.